Welcome to JayEmm Friends. We have the Alfa Romeo Stelvio Veloce with us today, and we're going to give you a second opinion, but we're going to be coming at it from a slightly different angle.
We've got virtually no experience in SUVs. We mainly drive sports cars, and luckily this guy gets to drive a few supercars.
If, like us, you've never owned an SUV before, and you're kind of thinking maybe it's time you got one, this might be the review for you. Well, there's one thing about this car that you cannot deny. It is a very, very good looking SUV. I'd say one of the prettiest ones out there at the moment. Just look at the design of the front. It's distinctly Alfa. You could not mistake this for any other brand of SUV. Some of them can start to look a little bit, I don't know, samey, but this is an Alfa without a doubt. The distinctive front design, the lights, that beautiful front grille, the wheels having that distinctive Alfa design on it too. This has got the Veloce badge on it, which means that this is the slightly quicker version, but not as quick as the Quadrifoglio. The overall design of the roofline has that very modern sort of sloping design, which some would argue takes away from some of the rear boot space. As you can see, we've been using this in the countryside like an SUV should. Just pop the boot there, automated opening, and you can see it's got a lot of space in the back. The seats also fold down. This can be removed. We've got our camera gear and James's camera gear in here at the moment. Does it fit stuff in the boot? Yes, it does. Does it fit a 6'2", 23-year-old in the back? Yes, it does. And if it fits him, it can fit your kids too on the school run. So I suppose the only thing left to do is to jump in it and go for a drive. Quick mention of the interior. It's okay. But I suppose the main thing that we're here to find out is it something we could drive? So from a driving perspective, the first thing that Damani pointed out to me when he got in the car was this really strange design of where the controls are. This plastic bit sticks out. Now, kind of doesn't bother you once you get used to it, but at first it's kind of, I don't know, I found it a little bit distracting. It's almost as though you didn't expect to have the person hold the steering wheel with their thumbs here and their palms here, as you would normally expect to. Now, I know a lot of people drive with their hands here and down here and like this and all sorts of other interesting places. In fact, I made an entire video on steering wheel hand position, particularly on fast 60-mile-an-hour roads like these, and I made that in James's Ferrari F12, and I'll leave a link in the description. But for cars like this, I suppose it doesn't really matter, because most of the time it's just about having your hands in a comfortable position for cruising along gently. And while you are cruising along gently, I noticed that actually this car's suspension is quite sporty. It's quite relatively firm for what I would have expected from an SUV. What do you think?
Well, it's the Veloce, you know, it's meant to be the slightly speedier one, slightly sportier one. So I would assume that they made some changes on the suspension for that. But what I find really interesting is this is kind of like the norm for SUVs these days, whereas back in your day, when SUVs were being made, the main focus was off-roading. However, you would never think to ever take this off-roading. You'd be fine taking it on a field or whatever. You need to go on a slightly rougher path for your camping trip, but you would never want to take it off-road like Range Rovers and other SUVs have always been made to do. And I just find this a really interesting new sector in cars, these SUVs that are just purely for road use.
Now, you know what? Where this car makes complete sense, and this sounds crazy, but London. In London, we have the most ridiculous number of speed bumps, and all it does is it just causes people to slow down really slow, especially in sports cars, go over them really slowly, and then go back up to the normal speed again, burning more fuel, more brakes, bad for the environment, etc. But, you know, it's meant to be traffic calming.
That's a great point. Let's start a sports and touring petition. Remove speed bumps to save the environment.
But what else do I like about the Stelvio? Honestly, I like the way it looks.
Oh, I love the way it looks. I think aesthetically this car's done a very good job. From the outside, it's a nice thing to look at. I feel like you could come home, see it parked outside the house and think, yeah, that's my car. The interior, I've got mixed feelings. I like the design aesthetically of the steering wheel, but obviously, as we said, when I'm holding it, I just really don't like the ergonomics of it. The interior plastics, the way they're this weird metal carbon fiber-esque material, I'm not a fan of. But other than that, I do like the aesthetics of everything else.
Well, now that we've talked a little bit about the interior, we might as well move on to the overall controls. What I love about this is you've got proper individual controls for the heating, and they are proper buttons. You don't have to faff around with figuring out things in a menu on a screen with a touch screen. I hate that. You know, things like heating controls definitely ought to be on physical buttons. It's got a nice number of buttons on the steering wheel that you can control most important things like the volume, accepting and ending phone calls, your various driver assists, cruise control, etc. But more and more cars are going to capacitive touchscreens or capacitive buttons that aren't physical in the sense that they move and have that same tactile experience. So I want to say nice one, Alfa Romeo, keeping it old school and keeping it real.
Speaking of volume controls, we had a bit of a test of the sound system earlier, and we were left slightly unimpressed, but James told us that you can spec one of these with an upgraded Harman Kardon system. So if that was something really important to you, as it's quite important to us, I think that's what we would go for if we were speccing out one of these ourselves.
Yeah, if you're going to have an SUV, you want to be cruising along hearing some banging tunes on a sick sound system, right? I think that would be just the minor shortfall of the specification on this particular press car. Now moving on to the overall driving experience, I've really enjoyed it. It's very pleasant, it's comfortable, it's a little firm, which means when you get to a little bend like this, that the car doesn't roll all over the place, you feel completely in control. The automatic gearbox shifts quite nicely. At the moment, we've just been cruising along in automatic because why would you put it in manual? However, if you do feel that you want to have more control over the gear changes, pop it over to manual, and you've got these really, really nice Ferrari-esque paddles behind the steering wheel. They stay fixed in position, which is kind of ideal for a car like this, because obviously if you're in town, you're doing sort of tight turns, you don't want to get confused about which side your gears are on. Sports cars, supercars, I prefer it to follow the wheel, but on a car like this, it absolutely makes sense to be in a stationary position behind the wheel. And when you give it some, it's got enough oomph to get you to where you're going briskly enough. Now, I'd be interested to see what the Quadrifoglio would be like compared to this. I would imagine that would be considerably faster.
So to answer the question, is this a good first SUV? What do you reckon?
Well, as I said, I am basically an SUV virgin. I've never owned an SUV before. I've driven one, which was an EV. It's really difficult to compare those. If I needed something for utility purposes, like car parts, or I don't know, the school run in an area that had lots of speed bumps, I think this could be a really good car to have. It's powerful enough. It's comfortable enough. It's sporty enough. If you happen to live in the countryside and, you know, have to go down narrow lanes, it doesn't feel particularly wide or scary in any way. It's a good size. I think the handling is quite good for what I would have expected from an SUV. And of all of the SUVs that I've seen, this one is a very, very good looking one. Now, some people do like this higher seating position, but personally I don't. It's just not for me. In fact, I'd probably want to get an estate just because I prefer to sit lower. I'd want to get, you know, a more powerful estate car. You can fit car parts in that just as well, and you still feel like you're sitting in a car rather than, I don't know, almost like a truck.
So then the answer to this review is really, is it the one you'd go for? No. So Alfa should make a Giulia Quadrifoglio estate.
Shooting brake.
Shooting brake. There you
Yes,
go.
there we go. But since you and I are, frankly, a very niche audience, they probably wouldn't sell that many of them, and I have absolutely no doubt they'll sell plenty of these. So if you've enjoyed this second opinion from the point of view of two people who are absolute idiots when it comes to SUVs and know nothing about them, please give us a like below. And if you want to see us drive something else Italian, only quite a bit sportier, check out this video here. So until next time, bye-bye.